This segment is going to be just a little bit different and a little bit longer because I brought in an expert on the subject. Heidi Reeser is an employee at the WSD, and she has some awesome ways to be incorporating or engaging students, or incorporating engaging qualities into our lessons. Boom, nailed it, and just rolling with it. So I'm actually going to jump off here real quick, and I'm going to transition this to a conversation that I had with Heidi, and she allowed me to record. It's going to be in two separate chunks. The first chunk is going to be about intentionally interacting with our learning targets and incorporating student needs or interest surveys. Then I'm going to come back at the very end. So you're going to see these two separate videos of me and Heidi. And then at the very end, you'll see me back in here just real quick to run through some tools that can be used to address what she talks about in that first video. The second half of this, I just thought was a very interesting one. She talks about external motivators to motivate students. And I wanted to include that conversation because sometimes we are resistant to using external motivators because we think students should just be intrinsically motivated with our lessons or with our content because it's interesting stuff to us, right? But we know that we're not intrinsically motivated in every single topic. And so sometimes we as teachers kind of go, ugh, when we think about these things that are like externally motivating students, like token economies. But we're talking about hooking students into our lessons, about getting them in the door. And extrinsic motivation plays a very real part in that. So you're going to see these two different videos here, and then I will be back at the very, very end. Having students interact with their learning targets and using that as formative assessment. Could you tell me a little bit more about that?
Absolutely, because you want to set the stage for what their level of engagement is out the gate. So either providing them an opportunity to either write or communicate one word that they can think of when you read to them or they read those learning targets, and or perhaps an emoji about how they feel about a particular learning target, right? Because you're gonna run the gamut, right, with a particular child's level of interest or even their understanding of a particular learning target. So it's great to be able to get an understanding of how they feel about a particular learning target out the gate so that you can plan meaningfully for engagement. And whether that means being able to look at some additional activities to help them understand what the learning target is, and or particular options for representation to invoke more engagement.
So what are some different ways that teachers could have their students interact with the learning target? And it doesn't need to be like this big, huge production, right? What's something that teachers could do tomorrow really quick to just have kids meaningfully interact with their learning targets?
Draw, write, or express one word that you can think of when you look and read this learning target.
And that can just be done on pencil and paper.
Yep, or on a sticky piece or a sticky pad or whatever, or pick an emoji that you feel when you read or think about this learning target. And so you could have a range of emotions as to what they think or feel about a particular learning target. And that's going to give you a bit of a platform with how am I going to plan and remove some barriers around engaging in a particular topic because the relevance isn't there yet. Or maybe the relevance is there. So it's like, wow, I can move on and get into some interesting aspects of a particular topic straight away.
Yeah, and like thinking specifically about like Warden School District, right? I know they've done some work with like identifying priority standards, and I'm not 100% sure on the language they use. So if you're watching this and you're from Warden and you're calling them power standards or focus standards, I'm really sorry. But then I would imagine that like if you're going into a unit or you're going into an activity or a lesson that's addressing one of those focus standards, and your students, like you do this activity with learning target, which specifically addresses the standard, and your students are like, I have no idea, like you're getting a lot of this formative assessment, that allows you to prioritize your time, right? Like, you know, as a teacher, this is something that I really need to focus on. This is something we've identified as a PLC, as a building, that's a priority for our students. And this quick formative assessment with these learning targets is telling me that these kids don't have any kind of, or have very little either interest in this or very little background knowledge with this. And so that's going to help you focus your time and accommodate for those students, or vice versa, right? Like if it's a focus standard and students have said that they're really interested in this, that's going to allow you to go down some different creative avenues and really be responsive to the needs of your students.
Absolutely. It also allows you to be able to identify, when we're talking about learner variability, you can identify those learners where, gosh, this topic is going to be, they may have very narrow interests, but this is going to be a topic that they really are going to be interested on. So maybe I'm going to need to think about how to use them to help make that topic relevant to other students, or how am I going to extend their learning because they have such a niche interest in a particular topic.
That's gold. That's gold. Okay, so hit me with that one more time. Oftentimes we are resistant to external motivators
to engage a student in a particular topic or relevance. But if we're meeting them where they're at and they don't have the level of engagement or relevance, that often means that we do need to come up with an external motivational system for them. So it could be altering your classroom management plan. It could be bringing some extra rewards for kids that persist through a particular topic until you gather more interest and more relevance. And so sometimes I think we get pretty stubborn in thinking they should have internal or intrinsic motivation, when really, if we're meeting them where they are developmentally, they may not. And they may not have that. They may have it on some topics, but not on others. And so you have to plan to remove that barrier ahead of time. And if you know that they're at that first level of, or rung of engagement, and they're not in that sustaining and persisting level of engagement, then you're absolutely going to need some external motivators to keep them engaged.
Okay, so I love that, because you're right. I think we fall into that trap of just assuming kids, they should be intrinsically motivated. They're in school, they're here to learn, you know, that whole thing. When the fact of the matter is, as adults, we're not intrinsically motivated to do everything that we're supposed to be doing. Right. I mean, one time my wife said something, or she had someone talking to her. It doesn't really matter. She was saying about, like, you know, why you're a teacher. Well, like almost every teacher is going to say, I do it because I love the kids and I love my job. And I really think that if you don't love the job, it's really hard to do, right? It's a tough job. But if we didn't have any kind of extrinsic motivation to come to work, we wouldn't be coming to work. You know, like, we have a paycheck, and I wouldn't teach for free. I wouldn't do my job for free. That's absolutely, it's not the reason I come to work, but I wouldn't go to work without it. You know, and so I do think that sometimes we fall in that trap of, like, I do my job because I love it. And I think that's absolutely true. But we're also motivated by extrinsic motivators. So that being said, I'm putting you on the spot.
That's okay.
Can you think of, like, appropriate extrinsic motivators for students? You mentioned, like, altering your classroom management strategy, or bringing in incentives or something like that for students. Can you think off the top of your head of some things that you have done or you've seen teachers do that were appropriate extrinsic motivators for students?
Well, one might be just taking your existing classroom management motivational system and just upping it, and knowing that you're going to have to give additional reinforcement through your already existing classroom management system. So that's one thing you could do. You could alter it and say, hey, you know, for this unit, we're going to play a behavior bingo game in association with what we're learning, right? And so you can look that up as to what that looks like online. But there's lots of different little external motivators. And of course, you want them to get to the self-regulation piece, right? That's our ultimate goal. So I'm not saying that you give up on that, but we have to gain traction. And we can't think that that's going to be in the students' in their playing field. We've got to level that playing field, remove that barrier, and sometimes it does include some extrinsic motivation. If you know that your classroom's highly motivated by individual rewards, well, then it might be a little bit of sponge time to play or do something educationally relevant that they like to do, that may be separate from the topic or the lesson you're teaching. But
Love
it
that.
gives them a little bit of a motivator to sustain and persist through a topic that's definitely not to their level of interest.
I love that. And so that's, I mean, it really is about sparking the curiosity, or at least hooking them into what you're doing to get them into those deeper levels of motivation. Now, I'm going to say something that maybe you wildly disagree with, which again, correct me if I'm wrong. Not every kid's going to be super intrinsically motivated about every subject, right?
Right. Absolutely. We aren't either as humans. So
yeah, like I'm thinking about, there's parts of this job not particularly fond of, but I do them anyways. It's my job, right? There's parts of this job that I love, like this type of stuff, intrinsically motivated. There's probably other things I should be doing, but this thing, I love this type of stuff, you know? So I think even that message for teachers, it's okay if not every kid is intrinsically motivated about every single activity you do in your class. Sometimes it is about pushing, pulling, dragging students along, or incentivizing them into your content.
absolutely. And it may need to look, it's sometimes a little more tangible than others. You know, it's getting to know your class and what their motivations are. But it's definitely something that is at that developmental bottom rung of engagement to help get some level of relevance and engagement traction, so to speak.
Awesome. Thanks. Okay, so we listened to Heidi and I have a conversation just around surveying students and doing some intentional interactions around the learning targets, and then also just some of those extrinsic motivators. I'm going to give you a couple of tools that could be used or adapted to meet those purposes. Not so much on that extrinsic motivator side. That is very personal and differentiated to each person's individual classroom. If you are interested in going down that route, please reach out to me. There are definitely some things we can do there, and I would love to hear what you have going on and how we can alter or ramp up maybe your internal behavior motivators in your classroom. My wife is also a behavior therapist, so a lot of, and I know you're making the joke right now. Oh, it makes sense because she married you. Yes, you know what? My parents make that one all the time. All right, so I'm going to go through 3 tools that you are most likely familiar with to just talk about how we can get students interacting intentionally with our learning targets or survey some interests. So the first one is going to be a tool that you started off using in this professional development, and that is Pear Deck. So Pear Deck is an add-on in PowerPoint, and it is relatively simple to use. If you want to create a Pear Deck activity for your students, you simply put the text on the screen. So I'm going to insert a text box here. And this is, I mean, I'd probably make this a little bit fancier if I was doing this with kids, but I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I'm going to make it real big. And then I am going to make a drag and drop activity in PowerPoint. So, or in Pear Deck. So I'm going to come here. I have the Pear Deck add-on here. You just need to add the Pear Deck add-on. I need to log in. It is a Microsoft login. So I'm going to come over here and you'll see it's using my Microsoft credentials. Then when I'm here, I have this draggable option. So the draggable option is only available in that paid version, but you could have students submit a choice or type in a text here or draw, which is also in the paid version. So if you're interested in playing around with that, you can get like a 30-day free trial or a 7-day free trial, and you can play around with that and see if it's worthwhile, and we can have that conversation. I am going to show you what the draggable option looks like. You can change your shape. So I'm going to make it a star. I'm going to change my color so it's not yellow. That's impossible to see. And then you can change the size of your shape here. So I'm going to hit update slide, and that's it. When students get to this Pear Deck session, they will have a little star and they can just drag whatever they want over to that indicator. And so if I wanted to ask a question, and notice I can do this after the fact, I could just say, drag the star to how familiar you are with the topic of our upcoming unit. Okay, and then boom, I've got that there. I've got some very quick class data. Another option is Poll Everywhere. So polleverywhere.com, log in, accounts are free, and you can just create an account. Don't sign up for their emails and informational stuff. It's not worth your time. And if you want more information about this, just let me know. But here are your different options. You can put things in here. You give students a link, boom, if they have their devices, and it works on mobile as well. You can just get some very quick feedback on that for some formative assessment. And finally, here I have a link to a form. This is on the Sway that you are accessing these videos on. And you are more than welcome to take this copy and take this and duplicate it and use it yourself and change it up. Notice it is incomplete. I put some little placeholders here for you to enter in your own stuff if you wanted. But the whole point of this is this doesn't even have to be on tech. You could have kids writing things on sticky notes, but if you're looking for some just quick group data on here, you can use a Microsoft form. And then there's different rating levels in here. You got some open-ended answers, and it can just be these very quick answers, very quick questions for students for you to get that information. And so you're asking their opinion, you're valuing their feedback, and then you can take that to make instructional decisions and alter the environment of your classroom to make that more engaging for your students.